Walker County Jane Doe was found on the side of I-45 in Walker County, Texas, near Huntsville. She had been brutally beaten, raped. She had been strangled with a pair of pantyhose. They still have never been able to figure out who Walker County Jane Doe is. Part of the trick to making a deceased person look alive is a lot of it is in the cheeks. When somebody dies, their cheeks flatten out. So all the puffiness of their cheeks completely disappears in death. When I first started working on it, this was the only photo we had of her. You can see her lips have been sewn shut. I spend my whole entire day researching unidentified John Doe and Jane Doe cases. This has been my life for the last 10 years and probably will continue to be. The mystery is still unsolved. My whole life I've been kind of anonymous. I wake up every morning, I go to work. In my spare time, I work on these cases. Whether it's doing forensic art or whether it's online sleuthing, I've kind of established myself and have become pretty well known in that regard.
A local accountant turned forensic artist is helping identify bodies.
Solving a 12-year-old cold case, how an artist helped identify a Jacksonville woman killed hundreds of miles away.
He makes facial reconstruction drawings.
With no identification, cops couldn't figure out who she was for years.
Carl Koppelman pores over a list of thousands of missing people.
I went right onto Web Sleuth and put up the words bingo.
Carl Koppelman will never forget the phone call you made.
Back when I first started, I was just an internet sleuth like everybody else on Web Sleuth. Web Sleuth is an online chat forum where people can log on and discuss cases of all kinds. These are people who come from all walks of life. They all have all different backgrounds and don't necessarily have any training in investigative techniques, but they all use their God-given talents to try to solve these cases in the ways they know best. The very first reconstruction I did, I was on Web Sleuth. There was one case out of Philadelphia. There wasn't a whole lot of reconstruction to do because he had just recently died and he wasn't decomposed. So really all I did was put open eyes on him and straightened his mouth out and then put the Philadelphia Eagles jersey on him. You know, if you're putting something on your Facebook page, most people aren't going to reshare an image of a dead person. So if you've got this very respectful presentation, people will share it. You can go onto Web Sleuth and there's threads for each of these Jane Does. As you can see here, Huntsville, Walker County Jane Doe. This is my pet case. This is the one I've been working on. You know, a pet case would be a case that a person spends most of their time on. When I first started working on it, this was the only photo we had of Walker County Jane Doe. In this case, she had been embalmed. Her cheeks were badly sagged from postmortem sagging. My first attempts to do this were very crudely done. I look back at them now and I think, you know, these look terrible, but I thought they looked okay at the time. I've always been kind of interested in unsolved mysteries. That may be a common thread throughout my upbringing. I would follow crime stories and the evil people do to each other. Back in the 70s, I was in junior high school at the time. My brother had a friend named John LeMay. He had been murdered and dismembered, and his headless body was found in a rest stop. As it turned out, he was the victim of a serial murderer named Patrick Kearney. He was known as the trash bag murderer. He had killed more than 20 young men and boys. For some reason in the 70s, there were a lot of those stories. There was also, of course, Ted Bundy, and there was the Hillside Strangler. They caught my attention. You know, it's a tragic story, but doesn't hit home the same way it does when it's actually someone you've seen and known around town. This was the depiction I had done of the Utah Jane Doe. You can still see the embalming effects on this face, so what I will do is take a live face, maybe same complexion. You can go transparent, so I'll probably do it maybe 20 or 25 steps and adjusting the contrast on the post-mortem photo so that the features come through, but you adjust the transparency on the overlay so that the skin tone and complexion comes through. Eventually, you'll have all the structural elements of the deceased person, but all the skin tone and vitality from the living person. And I can add in a background, and I add in my signature. Oops, that's not the right signature. Then I can add in a signature. I used to like to draw as a child. I was given the God-given talent of being able to draw faces. It was how I dealt with boredom in high school. I would just sit in the back and draw caricatures of the other students in the class. As I started getting involved in this, I found that, I could put those talents to a more noble use to be of service to the community. There are some I can do in probably 4 or 5 hours, and there's others it takes 2 or 3 days. It just all depends on what I'm starting with. From the very beginning, when I did that guy in Philadelphia, my skills were very limited. Over the years, I developed my ability, and it became apparent to me that, hey, I'm sitting around here taking care of my mother, and I don't have the ability to, go leave the house anytime I want to. So I'm sitting here on the computer, and this is a good way for me to become, to do something positive. These are all photos of my mother. I set up this little shrine, so to speak. In 2009, I had to leave my career as an accountant and become her full-time caretaker. So that was kind of how I got into the world of internet sleuthing, because I was home most of the time. It wasn't unusual at all for me to spend 10, 12 hours a day with a Walker County Jane Doe case. This was pre-embalming, so you could see that her mouth had a much different look. I created this image from there, and this was still when my skills were quite crude. And eventually, as I kept developing and developing, I came up with this version. By 2016, I was able to come up with this version. I must have revised this image probably 20, 30 times over the years. I spent a lot of my time thinking about who was this girl, what was her life like. Walker County Jane Doe was a teenage girl, probably about 15 or 16 years old. She had been hitchhiking and was dropped off in Huntsville, Texas, at this gas station, and asked the gas station manager for directions to the men's prison, where the worst of the worst prisoners are being housed in Texas. And she continued on. Later in the evening, at a truck stop on the north side of town, spoke with the waitress, again asked directions to the men's prison. The waitress immediately thought something was odd because she appeared way too young to be out on the street on her own, and asked her, do your parents know where you are? She's kind of flippantly responded, who cares? Then the girl went out the door of the diner, and the following morning, the girl's body was found about 4 or 5 miles north of Huntsville, abused, tortured, strangled, and left naked aside northbound I-45. Nobody's come forward to claim her body. No one has reported her missing. The police went to the men's prison in Huntsville and interviewed every employee and every inmate. Nobody admitted to having known her. This was Halloween night of 1980. I found it kind of interesting that I happened to remember that exact date. The story indicated that she was last seen asking directions to a men's prison. On that very night, I was 17 years old, attending a Halloween party, dressed as a prison inmate. At probably the exact moment that she was walking across town from the gas station to the truck stop, I was about the same age as she. Maybe that's for another reason that I'm so interested in this case, is she was part of my generation. This is my Facebook page that I had created for Walker County Jane Doe, and as you can see, I created a few different images of her. I had this other post-mortem photo of her from a side view. So I had a friend who had a 10-year-old niece, and I asked her to stand in my driveway and stick her thumb out. And this is a Google Maps view of I-45 northbound. To be sitting in Los Angeles and reading about the case online is a completely different experience. So I went to Texas I read online that they were going to have a Missing in North Texas event. While I'm in Texas, I could take a drive down to Huntsville and visit all the points of interest in the Walker County Jane Doe story. Well, most people probably wouldn't take a 3-hour drive just to visit somebody at a cemetery, but this is something that I'm very much interested in. It becomes more real to you to actually stand at the grave and say, okay, the remains of this girl are right underneath my feet. I'll be overjoyed when this case is ultimately resolved, because this is something that has consumed 10 years of my life. It takes someone who doesn't mind doing tedious, mundane, spend a whole day looking at pictures in yearbooks. Most people wouldn't have the attention span or the patience to do something like that. Law enforcement agencies, they have plenty on their plate, and they tend to deal with most urgent things. The cases of unidentified people aren't high priority cases for them. There's a void that needs to be filled, and the online sleuthing community is doing their best to address that need.
Because there's a lot of stories out there. Like, a lot of people are saying a lot of things. So whatever we hear, we just search. Like, in the area that they say, but we haven't found her. But we can't give up and not, do anything. We have to keep looking.
We're here in downtown Edmonton to meet the family of Misty Faith Potts as they search for her. She went missing just 6 months ago.
As a journalist, it's a story I'm all too familiar with, but as a Métis woman, Misty's story really punched me in the gut.
For me, I thought the only way I can help is if I get educated. The way I see it is the more education I have, the more the outside world will accept what I'm saying.
Misty defied a lot of stereotypes about Indigenous women. She had a master's degree, she was a champion for the environment, and was extremely outspoken about women's rights.
It's funny because if an elder goes out there and tells them what I'm saying, they won't really listen. So there's different worlds, and I'm trying to bridge those worlds.
Misty is one of nearly 1,200 missing or murdered Indigenous women across Canada. Her family has raised a $1,200 reward and go out and search for her as often as they can. They're allowing me to join them for a few days to see firsthand what the families of missing or murdered Indigenous women go through.
I just take frequent drives by. Can't sleep, I'll jump in a truck and come right around. So pretty frequent.
What do you hope to find? What are the things you're looking for?
Like I said, people have been saying they have seen her down there, eh? But you can never be too sure. Because most of the people that told me that they seen her, they asked for something right after they tell me that, eh? See, like this house here. Well, it's all boarded up now, but see the top one? That's a separate apartment. That window's a separate apartment, that window. And people live in there. And they'll rent you their place for $20 worth of crack. I think this is some of the places my sister was hanging out.
Misty started using drugs in 2011 after her marriage broke down and her brother passed away. She had a job offer and had started paperwork for rehab when she disappeared on March 14th of this year. She was 37.
Not too long after we put the posters out, we've heard that somebody was going around ripping them down. And I don't know, we kind of figured that might have been her ripping them down, like she didn't want to be found. But then after a while, it just didn't make sense,
I didn't want to do this. And I don't know, when you guys pulled up, I just wanted to tell you guys to go away. Because sometimes I'm in denial. I don't want to believe that she's missing. Drugs does make you do messed up things, and you aren't the person that you were. But there has to be a little bit of her still there for her enough to just pick up the phone and phone. That's why I don't think she's alive, because of that. I tell my dad this, but my dad really believes that she's alive.
We received a tip from a lady by the name of Renee that told us that they came here around about the time that Misty disappeared. And a couple of gentlemen got off a vehicle that they came in here with. They were told to keep their heads down. And they proceeded to remove something from the back of the vehicle. And they were gone for a period of 15 minutes. She described this area that we're in here. And so we came here and we checked on that side and around this side. We timed it for 15 minutes. From the time of her disappearance to the time that we received that tip, some time had elapsed, maybe 2-3 weeks. To me, it's possible that they could have brought her here if they did harm her and dispose of her body in one of these containers. Because I don't know if those people that drive those vehicles check what's in a container.
You think she just could have been dumped and the bin would have been hauled away?
Yeah, I don't know what their schedule is. That's why I'm saying, you know, it's the police have to do their work.
Do you know if this is a place that the police have come?
I don't know. I have not received any information at all whatsoever.
Misty's case was transferred from the Mayerthorpe RCMP to the headquarters at Edmonton's K Division in August. They declined our request for an interview because the investigation is ongoing and referred us to the national headquarters, who also declined our request.
To me, life on Alexis is pretty unstable, like, you know, dangerous. Ever since my daughter went missing, I can't even trust anybody on Alexis. I don't feel safe here.
Yeah. And Misty lived with you here for a little while before she went missing, right? Do you remember the last time you spoke to her?
I was going to where I work to go and do a few things, and she came with me. She said, "I'll come with you." She grabbed her sweater, she came with me. We went to, when we were going by the store, she said, "Okay, Mom, I'll just get off here and wait in here until you come back this way." And I went to do what I had to do. I came back to pick her up, and she came to the car and she told me, "Mom, it's okay. You know, I'll walk back." And I said, "Are you sure? Because just like, you know, this is still winter." She said, "Oh, I'm okay. I'll warm up while I'm walking, like, you know." And that's the last time I seen her. I never seen her after that. I need to find her. And, you know, at night, especially at night, I wonder, like, you know, where is she? Like, I can't just leave her there. Wherever she's laying, like, I just know I have to find her.
Now that the summer is ending and water levels are starting to go down, the Potts family is searching even more. They know that once the snow falls, the chance of finding Misty is even less likely.
You can't walk into the areas like we tried, but you know, you got to get permission from the landowners. This guy right here actually gave us permission to go through here, but the police asked us not to because they're going to come through here this week. And I find it funny because the police told me that they combed this whole area. They told me that they got search and rescue to come out, and they even brought me in to identify some items. And so I was under the impression that they already did like the land. So that's why we just did the ditches. And this guy comes here on Saturday, because I came here on Saturday, and he came and saw me, and he told me that they didn't even search his land, and they didn't search that part, and like, so I'm wondering where did they search then?
These last few days with the Potts family have been sobering and eye-opening. It's almost unbelievable to think that there are nearly 1,200 families across the country in the same situation.
Do you think Misty is alive?
I don't know. That's a question that is going to haunt me until I know for sure. That's why I'm relying on the police to help me with that.
It's horrible.
I woke up and I couldn't get in to that door to get him because of the fire. And I tried to climb in the window. And the neighbor pulled me out. I said, did you find him? And he said, yeah, we found him. I just thought they're gonna have to take him to the hospital and he's gonna be treated for a burn. And I didn't think that my baby would be dead.
The day after the fire, the Indiana Fire Marshal walked me and my father through the mobile home and said, I quote, "This is where your sister poured gasoline, this is where she lit the match, and this is where she shut the door."
The role of forensic science is to serve justice. I mean, that's why we got into this business. But we are asking things of the judicial system it was never designed or meant to do. Within the legal system, they vet information by what's called the adversarial system. So when I am presented as a witness for one side or the other, I'm part of the structure of the argument.
If you're arrested, you might as well have done it because they're going to get a conviction. A forensic odontologist testified that marks in the body matched my teeth, that those marks happened at the time of death, and that made me Ray Crone the murderer. And I told that judge, you got the wrong person, I didn't do it. At which point I was called an unremorseful killer, a monster, and said I was sentenced you to death.
What did your scientific test show? Take a look. Let's see. If that microscope would only tell us who did it. I'm working on that.
Most people are introduced to forensic science through TV and film. And because of this, we have come to see forensic techniques such as ballistics, footprint analysis, and bite mark identification as foolproof methods for solving crimes. But many forensic science techniques were not developed by scientists. They were developed in crime labs by law enforcement professionals who needed methods for testing available evidence. These techniques were often subjective and not run through the same kind of rigorous testing as traditional science. As exonerations increased due to a rise in DNA testing, it became clear that some forensic sciences had actually contributed to the wrongful convictions of innocent people.
Hey there, Ray.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Welcome to Tennessee. Ray Crone. I'm glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, come on up top
It's an
here.
insane view here.
Had to cut a few trees, but it was well worth it.
Oh, how long have you been out here on this property?
It's 6.5 years now. We've been here in Tennessee. Moved down from Pennsylvania, where I grew up.
Okay.
So we really do enjoy it down here. I like being, out in the country. It's that peace of mind, I guess, you need to be able to deal with some of the other stuff that life throws at you.
In the early 90s, Ray Crone was living in Phoenix, Arizona, working as a mail carrier. On the morning of December 29, 1991, Kim Ancona was found sexually assaulted and stabbed to death on the floor of the men's room at a bar where she worked, a bar that Ray Crone frequented. When police heard that Kim had told a friend that Ray was going to help her close up that night, Ray became their prime suspect.
So what was the forensic evidence that was used against you at that time?
Mine was a bite mark. A forensic odontologist testified that marks in the body matched my teeth, that those marks happened at the time of death, and that made me Ray Crone the murderer. But yeah, I was actually called the Snaggletooth Killer in the newspapers. It was December 31st, 1991, New Year's Eve. Just got home from my day at the post office, just stepping out of my car in my driveway. All of a sudden I heard the sound of screeching brakes, screaming, "Freeze, don't move, you're under arrest." I look over, it's a van load of police officers, full riot gear, guns drawn, bailed out of this van, black and whites pulling up, threw me on the ground and arrested me for murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault in Kim's death.
This bite mark evidence, why was this the centerpiece of this case?
I think two reasons. One, after they arrested me, that they had nothing else that they could try to attach to me. So it was something that they could definitively look at and test. But it was also something that added to the heinousness, the horrible outrage of the murder itself. So that bite mark was the thing that got the arrest warrant. That bite mark was the thing that got them to question me, and that bite mark was the thing that got them to convict me. Prosecutor introduced a videotape made by their bite mark expert, about a 45-minute rendition of how he matched my teeth and his latest techniques and technology, and how he matched this perfectly to the wound on the victim's body. And that was a 3.5-day trial, for 3 hours to find me guilty. The jury was dismissed. The judge set the sentence. And the prosecution puts on the first part where they argue why it's above and beyond the norm, why it deserves the death penalty, and they argue the bite mark was gratuitous violence, excessive pain and suffering, heinous and depraved, and you have to have one aggravating factor. And then it's time for the defense to put on the mitigating. Mitigating, of course, means to lessen, to abate, to ease, to soften, if you will. So I told him, I said, I got nothing to mitigate. You got the wrong person. I didn't do it. At which point I was called an unremorseful killer, a monster, and said I was sentenced you to death.
In 1996, Ray was granted a retrial based on a technicality. During the trial, he was able to introduce his own experts who refuted the prosecution's interpretation that the bite marks on Kim's body matched Ray. Despite this, the jury returned another guilty verdict. For 10 years, Ray remained in prison for the murder of Kim Ancona, until DNA analysis on previously untested saliva and blood found on Kim's body pointed in the direction of someone else as the killer.
They came back with a match. Came back with a match to a man that was currently serving a sentence for having sexually assaulted a child just a few weeks or month after that murder, and a man who lived about 4 blocks away from the bar in Phoenix, Arizona. So I was released after 10 years, 3 months, and 8 days, and Kenneth Phillips was charged with the murder. There is no question of my innocence.
Ray is one of hundreds of people to have been exonerated by DNA evidence. While DNA evidence is one of the most reliable forensic disciplines, others like bite mark analysis are far less definitive. But because judges have allowed prosecutors to use bite mark analysis as evidence before, it continues to be allowed in criminal trials. This is despite not having been subjected to scientific scrutiny and being ruled as unreliable by the wider scientific community.
I think this distills the problem down to a very clear example, where we know that the science has advanced and changed, and our knowledge of how bite marks can and can't be used is different than it was 10 years ago. But because legal precedent exists that it was admitted, that's what's being used as a litmus test, not the scientific part. So, and that's the concern right there. I mean, scientific validity and legal precedent are not the same. Admissibility is not validity. So we set up crime scenes in here. See all the painting? At the end of every semester, we have to paint over all the blood stains, spatter. And if you come in here with a light, yeah, because we use real human blood, and they'll start with very simple scenes and then work their way up to the end of the semester, a very complex scene.
Forensics professor at West Virginia University, Dr. Suzanne Bell, says these are complex topics for judges and jurors, often with no scientific background, who are meant to decide cases. In 2009, a pivotal report was released that critiqued the forensic field's lack of oversight, the different degrees of training required by experts, and the varying reliability of different disciplines, like bite mark identification. They recommended the creation of an independent government agency to address these issues. The Obama administration responded by creating a commission within the Department of Justice. One of the members of that commission was Dr. Bell. Who sat on the commission that was placed under the Obama administration?
The commission was a wide-ranging group of people. We had representatives from forensic laboratories, we had prosecutors, we had defense attorneys, academic scientists, and police agencies. So it was a really eclectic group of stakeholders. I mean, it was very complete. The charter was to try to make recommendations for improving the practice of forensic science at the Department of Justice. And then they would decide whether to implement those for the federal laboratories.
Why was it so important to include independent scientists to that commission?
I think that was in response partially to the National Academy's report about the importance of integrating academic scientists into a system that maybe they hadn't been as much integrated before, people that really understood how science was practiced outside of forensic science. And it brought a really important voice. And because, DNA science and things like that have advanced so far, it's important for that viewpoint to come in.
Last year, in yet another instance of a reversal of Obama-era policies, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced that he wouldn't renew the National Commission on Forensic Science, which was widely seen as a move to reduce the input of independent scientists.
The idea that we need an independent scientific voice in this system is critical. And this just kind of perpetuates the system as it's been. And we know that the system as it's been has had problems. And I think it is really time for us to clearly separate the role of the scientist from the role of the prosecutor, because we don't want the science to be tainted by the prosecution any more than we want it to be tainted by the defense. They have different motivations. They have different reasons. They will use the tools differently.
So you actually wrote an article for Slate magazine where you said that science and law aren't natural partners.
That is a common misconception that science and the law are both seeking truth and therefore that it's a perfect marriage of two disciplines, and it's really not. Within the legal system, they vet information by what's called the adversarial system. So prosecution and defense will make competing arguments. In science, we don't vet things that way. I mean, we have a process of vetting, we have testing, experimentation, replication, but within the legal system, it's competing arguments. So when I am presented as a witness for one side or the other, I'm part of the structure of the argument.
One person whose case rested on the testimony of competing experts is Christine Bunch.
Hi, Akil. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
She was convicted of murder and arson after jurors sided with the state's fire experts over her defense's independent arson investigator.
These were from the prison, actually. And I would hang on to them, but I was only allowed to have 50 pictures at a time.
21-year-old Christine was living in Decatur County, Indiana in 1995 when her mobile home caught fire in the early hours of the morning. Her 3-year-old son, Tony, was sleeping inside. Christine was woken by the blaze, and when she couldn't get through the flames to rescue Tony, she ran to get help. A firefighter eventually pulled Tony from the house, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. Christine was later charged with his murder.
It just doesn't penetrate your mind that something like that can happen and just wipe out everything. When I was first arrested, I thought, the law's gonna be on my side. I'm innocent. And when people say that and they tell the truth, it works out the way it's supposed to. Before the trial, I wasn't in a real good place. I started getting sick and decided I needed to go to the doctor. That's when I discovered I was pregnant with Trent. That was the moment that I realized God hadn't turned his back on me by taking my child, and he'd given me a second gift, and I had to fight for it.
Christine's case hinged on a state arson investigator's testimony that the presence of accelerants in the living room and the bedroom where her son Tony was sleeping proved the fire was intentionally set.
To a jury sitting there, they've just heard, the prosecution side say, oh, yes, this is what happened and it's an arson. And then they hear my investigator, who's differing with him, saying, oh, no, this was an accidental fire. Which one are you going to think is telling me the truth? If you grew up like I did, you expect the people that are hired and elected by your state to tell you the truth. So you're going to side with the prosecution. You're going to side with the state fire marshals because those are the people we expect to tell us the truth.
When did you first hear about the forensic evidence being used against you?
I heard about the ATF findings at trial. The little faint traces of kerosene that they found in the wood in the living room, I absolutely knew that was going to be there. The previous owner had a kerosene heater in there. We had a kerosene heater in there. That makes sense. The other samples that they threw in the living room and one in my son's bedroom, when that came out in trial, I think I was just in shock.
Despite the defense's experts saying there was a probability the fire was accidental, Bunch was convicted and sentenced to 60 years in prison.
That's my second child, Trent.
Oh, that's Trent.
Yes, these are all Trent and Michael when he would come to visit. And we'd make little crafts and things.
Michael, can you speak about the impacts that this false incarceration has had on your own life?
Yeah, I was 17 years old. I was getting ready to start my senior year in high school. I quit school. I raised a kid. I worked 3 jobs for 15 years, and I made sure that he was there to see her every week. I had to do what I had to do to make sure that rent's paid, there's food on the table, and it was hard. It was hard, and it affects every aspect of my life, even to this day.
In 2006, Christine's new lawyers subpoenaed ATF files from the original investigation. They found that the original report had been altered to show the presence of accelerants where they had not been found in Christine's home. These documents were not disclosed at her original trial. Her team also hired multiple independent experts to reinvestigate the evidence.
What was presented was the unaltered document from ATF that said no accelerant had been found in my son's bedroom. And Jamie McAllister, she is a forensic toxicologist. She was able to take my son's autopsy report and determine cause of fire. And arson burns very hot, very fast. But Tony didn't die of thermal injuries or burns. He died of smoke inhalation. His blood got to an 80% carbon monoxide level. So in order for a fire to give off that amount of carbon monoxide, it has to be smoldering for a long time. That means that it's happening in the ceiling, in the wall, somewhere around some of those electrical components that we had been having problems with. So it's the first time I'd ever heard somebody explain this in such a precise way that any layperson could have followed.
In 2012, on the basis of new expert testimony and the previously withheld ATF documents, Christine was granted a retrial and released. 4 months later, the prosecution dropped all charges.
And now that it's here, it still feels really surreal. I just want to spend some time with my son.
What's the first thing you'll do when you get home?
Probably disturb my son while I watch him do everything because I want to see everything he does.
After learning about Christine's case in which she was incarcerated for almost my lifetime, it's clear that you cannot fathom what this person has been through. That's what I've actually felt throughout this entire process. And talking with people who've been falsely incarcerated and who've been exonerated, is that there's no excuse for not getting the science right. And when it comes to that forensic science, there needs to be oversight when looking at how it's actually used in the judicial system.
I don't doubt the validity of the science. I doubt the credibility of the people that are testifying as forensic experts. I mean, how can you have 2 people testifying to the same set of evidence and come to a 180-degree different conclusion? If it's a science, a true science, then the same set of facts should lead each of them to the same conclusions.
Science is moving so quickly, and the law is inherently slow. People who make the decisions or decide whether to use this evidence aren't scientists. That's where the system's kind of we're at a crossroads, I think, in that we are asking things of the judicial system it was never designed or meant to do.
People don't realize in the blink of an eye, something can happen and change your life. So sharing it lets people know that you need to appreciate the little everyday wonderful things. And I am one of those people that absolutely cannot accept that nothing good came from it. So if you share and somebody feels the pain and they understand and they recognize, hopefully the next person won't have to deal with that.
There was absolutely an adrenaline rush, and that part, I just wanted it. I could not think of anything more exciting than doing something that might get you killed.
In August 2005, a team of burglars tunneled into the Fortaleza branch of Banco Central, the Brazilian central bank. The audacious raid was the culmination of months of meticulous preparation. Over the course of 3 months, the 25-strong gang dug a 256-foot tunnel from their base over the road, using a fake landscaping company as a front. After disabling the alarms, they took their time. Moving 3.5 tons of physical cash is slow work. The robbery wasn't discovered until the following Monday morning. When astonished staff tallied up the losses, it came to around $70 million US. The money wasn't insured, and the bills weren't numbered sequentially, making them almost impossible to trace. To this day, it remains one of the biggest heists in history. For as long as there have been banks, there have been more than enough people happy enough to rob them. Despite history throwing up the occasional Robin Hood-style bandit, the motive is usually pretty straightforward. Good old-fashioned greed.
I wouldn't ask for any defined amount of money. I would tell them, give me all of your 50s and 100s, and that was it. The final bank that I ever robbed, she gave me like $800 or $900. It was less than $1,000. And that was the only time where I didn't accept that as legit.
Most successful heists don't utilize violence. After all, what better way to get caught than leaving a bullet in a non-compliant teller who won't hand over the loot?
I didn't threaten violence. If you were more than 10 feet away from where I was talking to the teller, you wouldn't even have known it was a robbery.
Desperation can play a part. In July 2021, a man in California was convicted of stealing $2,500 from surveillance footage of his distinctive t-shirt. 61-year-old Edwin Harold had lost his job during the pandemic and was, he told authorities, frankly sick of being homeless. Despite the miserable motive, he was still sentenced to over 3 years in prison. Then there's the rare cases that don't seem to fit into any particular mold. Clay Toomey certainly resists neat categorization.
I thought to myself, if I can just walk in here and not be recognized by anybody, I could probably just rob the place.
In 2005, the then 26-year-old Texan went on an unusual solo bank robbing spree.
That was the gateway drug into bank robbery for me when I realized bank security is terrible.
No violence or accomplices, just an envelope politely asking the teller to hand over their 50s and 100s.
I had a note that said 3 very plainly, succinctly written lines. Give me your 50s and 100s. This is not a joke. I'm not going to hurt you. It sounds simple. It sounds like there's got to be more to it than that. But there's really not anything else to it.
Toomey's story speaks to a wider truth about bank robbery. It is, in some ways, an equal opportunities profession. All you really need is a cast iron self-belief. And there's another crucial thing to remember. It doesn't seem to matter how ballsy or experienced you are. The likelihood of getting caught remains pretty high. Take the infamous Hatton Gardens heist in April 2015, when a team of geriatric cons got away with an estimated £14 million in cash and jewelry from London's Diamond District. The heist itself was expertly planned and executed. After all, these were career robbers. Their downfall wasn't the job itself. Though they didn't leave any fingerprints at the scene, their digital footprint was laughably well-defined. On arrest, one of the robbers was found to have Googled drilling online and even had a copy of Forensics for Dummies at home. The old ways are inevitably changing. Naturally, there are still plenty of people the world over who are up for chancing an old-fashioned bricks-and-mortar heist. But a younger generation of criminals are attempting to take bank robbery online with varying success.
Bank robbery will eventually not even be a thing in terms of walking into a bank and taking money.
In 2016, a shadowy group of North Korean hackers known as the Lazarus Group came within minutes of a spectacular $1 billion windfall from the Bangladeshi National Bank without a single boot on the ground.
This hacking group is not just hacking and stealing money, but stealing money on behalf of the North Korean regime.
It later transpired the group had been lurking inside the bank's computer systems for a year prior to the big day.
The way they got into the Bangladesh Bank system was depressingly the way that most computer hackers get into most systems. It was a dodgy email. From there, the computer hackers managed to pivot around the bank and hop from computer to computer, a process that took months.
On the morning of February 5th, staff at the bank noticed a malfunctioning printer on the 10th floor. Little attention was paid to what seemed like a routine annoyance, but this was the first sign that something was going seriously wrong.
When transfers are made from Bangladesh Bank to another bank, they're made using a system called SWIFT, and there's a printout of those SWIFT transfers on a computer printer. So the printer prints out a thing that says Bangladesh Bank has just sent X amount of money. And they discovered the printer was broken. As they got the printer fixed a couple of days later, suddenly the printout started appearing on the printer, which revealed that the hackers had tried to transfer out $1 billion.
When they finally cottoned on to what was happening, they eventually managed to halt most of the money draining out of their accounts, save for $81 million. But the reputational damage was huge, even forcing the resignation of the bank's governor. Not that much is known about the gang, aside from a detailed FBI portrait of one suspect named Park Jin-hyuk, who is also charged with hacking Sony and the WannaCry cyber attack on the NHS. It's thought that he fled to North Korea not long after the heist, though he faces up to 20 years in prison if he puts his head above the parapet. Besides simple greed, there's something else that unites the elusive North Korean hackers, villainous London geezers, and Brazilian master criminals. In all three instances, law enforcement has never been able to recover the full amount of plunder. On the surface, that might even sound like a success story, yet the Hatton Gardens ringleaders are dead or in prison. Park Jin-hyuk is a fugitive, and even the architects of the Banco Central heist have experienced decidedly mixed fortunes. Of the 25 alleged gang members, several remain unaccounted for, having disappeared into the shadows to enjoy their ill-gotten gains. Others are serving lengthy jail sentences or have been kidnapped, murdered, and tortured.
Bank robbery is not a profitable industry. Don't do it. If that's what your motivation is, it's not going to work. Fun fact, you have to pay all that money back.
Whatever the cash windfall, it doesn't seem like much of a reward for a lifetime of looking over your shoulder.
It just seems such a tragedy that somebody had lived to the point they were at least a teenager and they were missing from somebody's table. She obviously had a name and somebody remembered her. Somebody certainly changed her diaper and fed her and combed her hair at some point in time. Once the internet came along and we were connected to it, and it was a very young internet at the time. There was no Google, there was just startup search engines. So literally tent girl, missing sister, missing daughter, murder, any way that you could combine those searches. My name is Todd Matthews and I'm known as one of the first cyber detectives. I first heard of the story of the tent girl in 1987. My future wife, Lori, had just moved to Tennessee from Kentucky. I was 17 years old and it was near Halloween, so we were telling ghost stories. She explained how her father had found a body on the side of the road wrapped in a canvas tent wrapper and how a grave had been created with her image on it. No name, just tent girl. That just stuck with me. I had a brother and sister that had passed away as infants years and years ago, and I knew their names. Their name was on their stone, and I felt like Tent Girl didn't have her real name. And I feel like that's why it stuck with me so strongly for so many years. And I think it was really obsessive right from the get-go. The process of trying to find out who she was immediately began. I looked at magazine articles, newspaper articles. The process of gathering and sorting had already began at 17 years old. Some of the biggest obstacles in the story was getting information. Everything was just hard copy. You know, you had to physically go and pick up a piece of paper or look at a microfilm or physically drive somewhere. It was go to the grave, maybe have my father-in-law repeat something or compare information that was in the article based upon what he told me. The newspaper article described her pretty much as a child, but he said he actually saw her and he felt like that she was possibly older. So there were some data conflicts immediately. So I was looking for more than just a child, perhaps a young person, young woman. And there was no internet. It was all a very manual process. And it was just like cold calls at the time, There was no cell phones. You dialed a number and you hoped that somebody would be on the other end that could help you. It's really hard back in the early days. Ultimately, I ended up at an assembly plant where we made air conditioning parts, and the day job was actually a night job. So it was a little odd. I'm staying up all night long, so I think that darkened the mystery for me. So in the early days that I was trying to work on the case, you would obsess with it. And there was one time in particular, I came home from work and I'd fallen asleep and I heard a noise in the kitchen. And I remember walking into the kitchen and there stood a figure inside of what appeared to be a tent wrapper on a sleeping bag. So it was a figure inside of a bag. And I asked her who she was. And she said, "Cut me out and you'll know. Get me out the bag and I'll tell you who I am." So, flash forward, she's on the couch and I have a butcher knife in my hand and I'm cutting the tarp, the canvas tent wrapper. I'm cutting through it and I could remember feeling the vibration of the blade and the sound as it was cutting that fabric. And then as it came open, that dark slit popped open and, a decomposed face popped out and I woke up. I was sitting straight up in bed, and it's scary to think of that, to the point that it's obsessed you to that point, that you're that involved in it, that's that much in your head. When you're spending that much time, you're starting to lose sleep. And by this point in time, it was having an effect on my marriage, racking up telephone bills that were difficult to pay, arguments that were difficult to win, rationalizing doing this with no results. At what point do you say enough's enough? There's so many times I said I'm done, but it was more than an obsession. It felt more like an obligation. So it was all the way to the mid-90s. That's when I first heard of the internet. So it's a good 10 years into our marriage before we found the internet, before we realized what the internet was. This was a new tool, so it wasn't endless phone calls, but the internet was still very young. You couldn't just go search a story and pull up a lot of information. A lot of that information had to be put on the internet, but it was a shortcut. It was a way to communicate with people. So I created a website for Tent Girl. I gathered up everything that I did know about her, and I thought, well, maybe if I just put something online. It was the original image of the tombstone, the height and weight that's described. This person could have been between 13 and 21. I tried to find ways to hide it away, and when they were sleeping or I should be sleeping, there was always a way. Snuck off to my little office and just again, missing sister, missing this, missing that. And I would see different databases that would pop up. And I did find a note where a lady in Arkansas was looking for her missing sister, last known to be in Lexington, Kentucky, very short distance away in December of 1967. That's all I needed to hear. That was enough. It was very clear at the time that that's who I was looking for. Once there was an announcement that this was indeed the Tent Girl, and I'll always remember those words, the Tent Girl is indeed Barbara Hagman Taylor. That was just chilling. It wasn't just the end of a journey. It was the beginning of another journey. To me, it freed me up. A curse had been lifted. And then the fruit of all this work was there. I didn't know that during this cycle of trying to, piece things together, I didn't know really there were some foundations being laid. After the resolution of the Tent Girl case, the cyber community lit up. I heard from missing persons advocates from all over the world, and I helped in the development of the first database for missing and unidentified persons. So to start working with law enforcement to try to get their cases publicized, digitized, resolutions began to happen. The plight that they had, the fact that it was very difficult to put a name on a body. People brought their problem to the table to help resolve it, and the end result was a national database. I was so blinded by trying to find what I felt I needed that I didn't realize that, some foundational work was being done. That time I spent wasn't just time wasted. There was success in what I was trying to do. And in fact, it left a footprint. It repurposed the use of the internet. It caused people to look at things in the way that I was looking at them. Another way of using the internet, a way of sharing information. Was it well worth it? Yeah, it was. It was well worth it.